Hello Internet, this is Josh Taylor with Right Foot Down, and I'm sitting in the back of my own damn car. Why? Is because we're about ready to do a Z3 rack install on the E46 M3, but before we do, we're going to show you a scientific demonstration of the difference it makes with this rack versus the non-CSL, non-ZCP steering rack, often called the yellow tags, which can be kind of pricey, not super available. The Z3 is a tighter option than the yellow tag, which is a 2.7 lock to lock versus the factory 3.2. So we're going to kind of demonstrate, or hope to demonstrate, the difference between the two here in this video. All right, check it out. All right, so our model here, Sean, our test driver, our stunt driver, we'll call him stunt driver, has put on yellow tape. Where's the tape you used? It's just normal tape, right?
Yeah, well, it's yellow masking tape.
Yeah, so you can see on the steering wheel that we put it center. Can you put the wheel straight to see? Yep, so that tape is straight on the top of the wheel there. And our scientific measurement is just going to be taking the same turn in the same parking lot before and after, and we'll kind of just visually see the difference in the angle required to make that same turn with this OE steering rack compared to the Z3 steering rack. There should be a little bit of a difference, being 3.2 to 2.7 lock to lock, but I mean, we could be wrong. Sean, you think there's going to be much of a difference?
I think there will be some.
You think I'm dumb for doing this?
I mean, you're dumb for a lot of things.
Okay, so we're going to go around this island here, and we're going to just measure how much steering is needed to keep a constant circle around it. All right, Sean, let's go. So all right, so we're starting off with pretty much exactly one turn right now. Can he fix that? Okay guys, so to make this work, we're going to need this pile of parts. The only thing that I purchased used was the actual rack itself. So this is the BMW Z3 steering rack. It's got a little bit different design than the newer racks. You can see that this has crossover tubes here that the E46 racks do not have. One of the things that you can't buy on your own if you're looking is these end donuts here. So you want to find a rack that's got those donuts on there. Okay, so once you've got the rack, you need to get a couple parts to convert it. So there's a number of bolts that I'm using here that are new. You can see the part numbers on them from this angle. Let me zoom in a little bit. So I've got washers and the banjo bolts. And then there is I decided to get a new steering guybo, whatever it's called. I think I got all of this stuff here from FCP Euro, and then because we're putting in a used rack, I picked up new dust boots there, and then we're going to have to swap over the tie rod ends from the E46 to this rack. So we're going to have to disassemble this, swap over the parts, and then put it back in. All right, are you ready?
I think so.
All right, so obviously the first thing we want to do is take the wheels off both sides. There are some panels in the front that we want to remove just to get more access to the steering rack. Okay, so before you get started here, a couple things to note. With the Z3 rack, there's not a built-in bracket for the power steering line here. So a lot of people will zip tie it in. The other thing you want to do before you actually start taking things apart is you want to measure the distance from the outer ball joint here to the other side. You're going to have to kind of like literally ballpark this the best you can, because when you put it back together, you want to have the correct lengths on both sides so that you know, you don't have a car that has a totally out of whack alignment. You're going to want to get in alignment anyway, but you want to have it be streetable. So measure those lengths. We're going to do this probably with either tape or string. I'm not sure. Sean's going back to get something. He's got an idea of how we're going to do that. All right, so we're measuring the inside. We're going to do two measurements. We're going to do the inside of the knuckle and then another one on the outside, just so we have multiple measurements to go by. So string this around here. So if we look at the inside here, it is right at like 54 and an eighth maybe. And then if we look at the outside, okay, let's do outside now. It's pretty much, we're looking at pretty much 57. All right, so we just disconnected the high pressure power steering line, just one bolt that comes out of this. This is probably what, a 10 mil?
Yep.
Of course, they're all 10 mils.
Not all of them.
Okay, well, that line's disconnected, and then we're going to want to disconnect probably. We're going to drain the fluid, says Sean. Okay, so we're draining the fluid next. Okay, so we disconnected the line coming from the pump first, and then we just disconnected the line coming from the reservoir. So you got two different lines to disconnect, and I can't seem to get a good view of it, but you got one that's right here, and then the other line is back in there. You'll see it here too. So just kind of noting here, you might want a big pan because it drips out of more than one location. Front and through a drain hole here. So
Of course, I can't find the bigger frame.
wah, wah. Okay, so the light is shining on the Gibo, which is Gibo, which connects the rack to the actual the steering column. And the debate now is, do we take this panel off to get access to it, or pull the rack off with it on there? And I think, yeah, going from the side. So what's the plan? What are we going to do?
We're going to go through the side. We're going to try to take it off with the rack.
All right, so we're going to try to take it off with the rack. Let's see how that goes. So that's the Torx for the steering column. We want to disconnect that, and the steering column should just slide off. I mean, a spline, you might have got to wiggle it a little bit, I'd imagine, but that's what we want to disconnect. Okay, so now at this point, we can go ahead and loosen up the tie rod bolts, nuts on both sides. And then after that, we should loosen the rack itself with those two bolts there. And hopefully the rack will just kind of fall out.
Oh, look at that. Someone didn't tighten down your plant.
Wah, wah. All right, and the other thing we're going to do is make sure that we can break loose the tie rod ends. So we got a 13 on this side, and then a 21 on that side, and we're just going to make sure that we can break it loose here.
Nope.
No?
Nope. Probably gonna have to be heated.
Sure, you want to? Okay. No, we'll see.
Yeah, if it's not doing anything at this point, it's not gonna. Okay, this one's loose.
Okay, so yay on the driver's side. Passenger side, we may need some heat. All right, and since this side is stuck, we're going to heat this up after taking the rack off. So next thing we're going to do is loosen up the ball joint nuts here and drop the rack. I think these are 18s on the end here. I might have misspoke earlier. It's 21 here, and then a 13, I believe, here to loosen them up. So we're using a ball joint popper here just to make it easy. If you don't have one, apparently you can struggle with a hammer.
But when you do use this, watch your feet, because it'll come off if it's
Yeah. I can't really go flying too far. Oh, you mean the actual popper itself?
Yep.
All right. So Sean informs me to go flying, so I might want to back up. We'll just watch this from afar. You guys can see how this works, right? So it's just going to apply pressure in one end and push down on the ball joint and it'll fall right out. So hit it. Like, I knew that was going to happen, but still was, still was a little startling.
Still no win.
All right. All right, so up next are the two, where they are, the bolts and nuts to disconnect the rack itself. There's a bolt that goes up this side, and then there's a nut on the top side. That's should be a 16, or I think he said 16 mil. All right, so while Sean is loosening up the other side, what we found is that this bolt, maybe it's just my car, but it hits the bottom plate here. So we're either going to try to lift up the rack and see if we can wiggle that bolt out after the rack is lifted up a little bit, or we're going to have to remove this plate, which isn't a big deal, but we'll see if we can get around without it. I'm only holding with one hand. All right, now we got those bolts out. And we'll see how the rack slides out. What's the plan to take it out? Just kind of manhandle it with two hands and pull it down?
Just kind of work it out a little bit. The column's not 100% out of that Grebo, so.
All right, so yeah. So Sean was saying the column's not 100% out of the Grebo. We'll see how it drops. There it is, out with the old. All right, so now we got to get these ends off. This one was already loose, not a problem. But this side was not cooperating, so we might get it off with a little fire. Ah, there we go. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Okay, so the factory rack weighs in at 14.1 pounds with the boots and inner rods, and you'll see there's no bolts, no Grebo, no nothing on here, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at the Z3 rack. Reset back to 0, and this is an aluminum body. How much less do you think it's going to weigh, Sean? Before we,
I feel like it weighs more, actually.
you think it weighs more?
I think so.
What? Okay, well, we'll find out. Because it should be an aluminum body. Oh, what did we say the other one was? 14.1 pounds? Oh, you were right. Damn. Okay, so it's actually, it doesn't weigh less. It weighs more. Okay, so we're gaining 2 pounds on the front end by going to the Z3 rack. I'm kind of surprised by that. All right, well, that's what it is. All right, so not sure if this is going to make it into the video or not, but the issue we ran into is that the Z3 rack has a lot of play in the inner tie rod here, as you can see. So the thought is, can we swap over the tie rod ends to the Z3 rack? From what we can tell, the answer might be yes, and we're going to try. The issue right now is nobody has these inner tie rods in stock, and the option is that we're going to either have to put this in the car as is with a little bit of play, or we're going to see if we can swap over and convert to the E46 style. Now putting in the new Grebo. Okay, so correction, we're actually putting it on the steering column first, and then we'll slide the rack up in there. All right, so what we're doing now is making sure that the steering rack stays center by bungee cording the steering wheel to make sure that it doesn't move. Right now it looks pretty center, but we want to make sure that doesn't change as we're installing the rack. Z3 rack is going up.
We'll do this side first so that we can wiggle the
All right, so we're going to reuse the Z3 rack, that rack bolts that had a little bit different material, at least, as you can see. Not sure if they're lighter or not. We didn't weigh those. And then once that side's in, we'll be able to finagle this side up and into the Guibo, however it's called. It's not, all right, we're doing this wrong, so everybody on the internet knows here.
Because they're bad, I'm using my massive slit lock pliers.
Yeah. So, yeah, if they were good, you wouldn't want to do that. All right, so this is how the old E46 Z3 design comes off. Oh, hang on.
This is not the worst of the two.
Yeah. All right, so you can see it's ideally it should stay in place as it's shaken, I guess. Yeah. Oh, hang on. And then compared to the other one, well, really we should compare these bad ones here to the ones that are good on the M3. Hopefully here, compare both of these just so you can there. So yeah, so bad on the left, not as bad on the right, but still not great. Okay. Wait. I guess I'm gonna have to step on the other side then, aren't I?
Ready?
Whoa. So that one broke loose. Please be the same design. Please be the same design, same threads. Does it?
It threads in.
Oh my God. So we might be able to use the E46 N-links inner tie rods on the Z3 rack. Yes, Smithers. Fingers crossed we're going to make this work today. And if it does, then for the internet and everybody else, that's good news. All right, so buttoning up, by buttoning up we mean tightening up the rack to the cross member. All right, on to the next one. Okay, so now that the ball joints are on and it's time to measure. So before we said, take a quick look at the paper over here, we wrote down 54 and an eighth on the inner and then 57 and a quarter on the outer, outer to outer. So I'm gonna hold this guy right here. You want inner or outer first?
We're gonna do outer.
Gonna do outer? Okay, so this is outer. Right there already?
Yep. Go ahead. Go to the inside.
Okay, and then inside.
Oh yeah. We're just
Spot on?
Just almost.
Ah, we're so close. So close. So one thing to note is that the Z3 rack doesn't have the bracket here for the power steering line. So we're just gonna zip tie that up and out of the way or find some other way to mount it, probably with zip ties, just to keep that up. Otherwise, we're good. We had originally used zip ties here to temporarily mount the boot, but we're going to go ahead and throw on the actual clamps instead, since everything looks good. Here's the zip tie going on for the steering hose. Installed. Now, if this wasn't such kind of trial and error for you guys, you would typically want to use the new boots and the new clamps rather than doing the whole zip ties like we did, only to take them off. So these boots were in good enough condition that we're not going to bother taking them off and putting the new ones on yet. We're just going to go ahead and reuse those clamps and get everything buttoned up. And there we go. And Sean noted something just a second ago. When you're tightening down this clamp, you don't want to get it super tight because this donut here has to be able to spin, because when you're doing an alignment, the technician needs to spin the outer tie rod, so it can't be so tight that it spins with it. It's got to be, well, you know, it's got to be able to spin freely.
Yeah, we're already down there. So.
All right, so he's low on fluid. We're gonna stick this back in and add some more in there. Gatorade.
Run the wheel back and forth, please.
Feels a little crunchy. Feels notchy.
Yeah. Go all the way.
All the way.
Yeah.
Much smoother now.
All right. Now let it rust. Let it rest.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So first, when you're gonna put in the fluid, can you see me like this? First, when you put in the fluid, you're gonna get a lot of resistance, and it feels like it's like going over notches as you turn it. But as you go through the full cycle, it'll relieve those notches, and you go back the other way, you'll get some, go back again, and it's good. So at this point, is there a reason why we're letting it run more?
What?
Is there a reason why we're letting it? What are we waiting for right now?
No, you shut it off.
Oh, all right. We can shut it off. All right, time to go do our very much scientific test. From the back seat. All right, so there's one.
It's actually a tighter radius.
Okay, so that's exactly what we're expecting. If it's a one around, so release it to the point where you think it was the same radius as what we were doing before. All right, so if that's never mind that clunking on my differential, but okay, so this is probably about the same radius as what we were doing before ish.
Yep, so it's a fraction.
Okay.
It's
It's definitely tighter in the slow stuff, but at the higher speed, it's going to make it even more different. So let me go record outside the car. Okay. All right, our scientific method is ever so scientific. I'm going to zoom in on Sean, and he's going to make one. All right, go ahead. All right, so there's one. That's dead center. And now we're going to see how the car goes around. It should be, compared to the other video of me standing in the same spot, it should be a tighter radius, because that same steering angle or steering wheel position should result in the car making a tighter radius. Now, this is all very low speed stuff, of course, so you imagine as the car is traveling faster, that will translate into just a much tighter turning radius, the higher speed, or much more responsive, right? I just want a good shot right now with this polarizer. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. Maybe this will be my thumbnail. Bam!